Mark, welcome, man. How are you doing?
Hey Carlos, good thanks and yourself.
Good, good. You're our third ever guest on the DAP Dialogues podcast, where we attempt to deconstruct what makes a great Web3 product. And yeah, welcome. Mark is joining us from Coinshift, and I'll leave it up to you to explain what Coinshift is and what your role is in there, for anyone that might not know you.
Yeah, sure. I'll keep it short. I'm product lead at Coinshift, and Coinshift is a crypto treasury management platform. What does that mean? Essentially, any on-chain business can do payments, manage their assets, and do bookkeeping from a non-custodial multisig. So in essence, it's basically managing your financial workflow in a single app.
And actually, well, for anyone that's listening to this, I think you might enjoy visiting Coinshift's website since you obviously care about products enough to listen to a podcast about them. And yeah, I gotta say, you guys got a great website. In particular, I really enjoyed the testimonials section. I think it's very well done, and but we'll get back to that in a minute. So, in your opinion, you got quite a unique product, at least when it comes to the Web3 space, to the Web3 version of it. What do you like about it? What need do you think it solves? What do you think makes your product stand out? Or what are some initiatives that you are proud of?
Thank you. I
So,
think
like seven
maybe
questions off the
yeah,
bat.
yeah, yeah, no worries, no worries. I think maybe it helped picking a boring problem. We're not building an intense based protocol for I don't know prediction markets or building a perps trading protocol or something as innovative of that nature. I think we're solving a problem that enables these other very innovative teams to thrive and scale Ethereum and blockchain. And yeah, I think it all kind of starts with picking a niche problem in the beginning. And this is before my days at Coinshift. So Tarun, the co-founder, and the early team, I think they found a very niche problem where it's basically like, how can I pay 100 people in a single transaction from my multi-sig without any developer time involved, so no scripting, etc. Um, and obviously entering the market at the right time. So that niche problem was solved, and it was a hook to get the first 10 customers like Uniswap Grants, Biconomy, ChainSafe, etc. Yeah, I think from there it's kind of, try play by zero assumptions model as much as possible. So relentlessly build with users hand in hand. And it's not it's not just about like blindly following what users say, right? It's like, how do you innovate on behalf of them? How do you actually live their lives and yeah, put yourself in their shoes? It sounds a bit generic, but I think that's what a lot of at least Coinshift success boils down to.
I mean, yeah, and generic advice is generic for a reason, right? It tends to work. Um, Following that line, talking about the putting yourself in users' shoes, or but also not blindly following whatever they say. Do you have any specific examples of a feature that was requested and then didn't pan out exactly how it was planned to, or any or does anything come to mind regarding that?
Um, yeah, I think it's a great question. I'd probably say um, when we were working very closely with Perp Protocol, they kind of had this request come up like, okay, they're running month end. How do they actually view their on-chain balances for their 8 different multi-sigs? And in a kind of a TradFi world, you would calculate that using a time series data to go back in time. But on chain, you have a lot less confidence that you'll actually be picking up those exact transaction details, because maybe you've missed certain transactions because there aren't events logged for that or somewhat of that nature. So I think I'm very proud of what our engineers built in the end, where they were able to directly call the balances for the last block executed in a month, and then attach the fiat prices to that, and give Perp this report, which became one of our most popular features, called Portfolio History.
And it is indeed what you would call a solution to a boring problem. But it is a problem nonetheless, and I think that's where a lot of Web3 products tend to fail. They just tend to try to invent a problem first and try to attempt to solve it, and then they get mad when no one actually has that problem that they made up. So in my opinion, that's exactly where these financial products should start, by fixing the everyday problem of even of businesses that do not necessarily want to be Web3 businesses. Because it's the case, for example, that at some point I had a bunch of freelancers running underneath me, and it was a distributed team. They were everywhere. I would just pay them in crypto, and my business had nothing to do with crypto. But when you have like a guy in Nigeria, a guy in Georgia, a guy in Mexico, it's just easier to deal with. And that's what we hopefully want crypto to be, right? The money rails for the world, not necessarily just a circular economy for degens. What other insights come to mind when you're thinking about creating a product that hopefully attracts people outside of Web3, not only the existing businesses in crypto?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question, right? A lot of focus is placed on retail and how do you drive adoption for retail. But our kind of our way of addressing, like, how do you scale the adoption of blockchain as a new payment rail, borderless payment rail, is, well, actually, how do you help the businesses that are first natively running on chain? But then secondly, how do you bring on the next tranche of businesses, which may not be au fait with the details of transaction logs from Ethereum, from EVM specification. So it's like, how do you abstract away the complexity of the blockchain so that businesses can focus on their core business and innovate there? I think that's how I'd kind of summarize it.
And how do you abstract the blockchain?
It's a good question. I mean, look, the patterns in Web 2 exist, right? The patterns in fintech exist. Follow those patterns, don't reinvent them. But it gets interesting when in certain cases you have new primitives that sort of just completely break the Web 2 model. Maybe I can talk about an example of streaming. So streaming, that's super interesting. So Carlos, why, if you think about when you get paid, when in the month do you typically get paid as an individual?
Yeah, typically 2 times per month or a month. Or once a month, so towards the end of the month. And I did want to talk about the streaming payments feature with you because I thought it was super interesting. So yeah, excited to be touching on this.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so you get paid like every fortnight or every month. Okay, sure. But why is that the case?
Well, usually something like that would happen because your employer wants to pay you for work already done, right? And not for, or some people might just pay ahead, but they typically feel like that also makes sense to reduce accountants' overhead, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's something along those lines, right? Like back in the day, micropayments weren't a thing, and then a decision had to be made. Okay, if you're just doing one payment over a period, when is that payment? Okay, let's give the power to the employers. Okay, makes sense. Slightly unfair, but it makes sense. And then you see, right, a system formed around this, and it's like once a payment per month, per fortnight, and that system just kind of perpetuates it. But now you find a point in time where you have programmable money, and you can, in theory, get paid by the second as you work. So, on this podcast itself, you could have already received 5 USDC, or I don't know how much you get paid, but you could have already received some money, and you'd see it in your wallet literally increasing every second. So I think it becomes interesting then when you get new primitives that sometimes just break the way things work as well. So it's kind of like a follow the patterns where they exist. Where they don't, you have to think from first principles. And streaming payments are interesting because they also become a nightmare for accountants, where accountants may be used to having a single payment or discrete payments. Now this is a continuous stream of money. How do you design new systems for that? Becomes another problem statement.
That's a really cool way to think about it, and I think streaming payments just hits the nail in the head when it comes to understanding how Web3 can be a differentiating factor for a product like this, because you wouldn't effectively be able to do that with PayPal or with whatever solution you're competing with in the traditional world. But it's incredibly cool that, okay, if you have like a theoretical, super fast, super efficient blockchain, there's no reason why you wouldn't want to stream payments by the second and have people just have a lot more freedom with their paychecks or with their money. And also it's just nice to see the number go up. Like our entire industry is kind of built upon that principle. When it comes to reasoning from first principles, I mean, what other first principles have you found that you try to guide yourself from?
That's a good question. I would say it's like it actually. Let's just say, like, I'll go back to the streaming example, but in a different sense, a different use case. But streaming can still be a solution for this. It's like, okay, a fintech experience or a business banking experience, I can set up a recurring payment, right? This recurring payment can itself be easily done in Web2. It's a solved UX, but it's easy to do because it's the banks take custody of your funds, right? So in Web3, if you're operating from a self-custodial, non-custodial wallet, how do you set up automated recurring payments? Do you go ahead and build off-chain infrastructure and then incur gas fees each time you're submitting a transaction? Do you go ahead and implement streaming, where it's a one-time setup, and whilst the blockchain is running, the funds are flowing in real time? Do you delegate some authority, say a spending limit, to a smart contract that can execute on your behalf? It starts to become like due to the self-custodial and non-custodial nature of the blockchain or certain smart contract wallets on the blockchain, you do need to like rethink those experiences that people may be used to in fintech.
And okay, for anyone that might be wondering upon listening to this, how do you make the streaming payments work?
We've done a native integration where effectively someone can come in, they can set up a stream payment to up to 100 people in a single transaction, and then each month, if they want to, they can edit that, or they can stop the stream based on if people are offboarding, onboarding, getting raises, etc. So I think it's about deciding when to do a native experience, when to use a widget, when to partner. And there's no one exact way to do that.
Right. But in your case, I mean, how do you, for example, avoid paying like a ridiculous amount of gas fees for something like that, for example?
Yeah, sure. So one example is if you think about like Coinshift, we dog food our own product. Coinshift's treasury itself is run using Coinshift. Wouldn't make sense not to do that. And for people who want to get paid on chain, they can either get paid through a mass payout, where it's say a once or twice a month payment, a single transaction, maybe, I don't know, $5 in gas fees, or in Polygon it's a few cents in gas fees, or you could set up a stream. So it just depends on the nature of what the recipient, in which format they would like those funds. But yeah, those are two examples of how we use our own product for streaming. I mean, for reducing gas fees.
But I might not be following here too well. But does the
Yeah.
streaming inquiry end up having no fees? How come? How come that happens?
Yeah. So what you do, if I explain, is you basically set up a transaction, you execute that transaction, and from that point in time, the money is transferred from one wallet, your multi-sig address, to another address, and it doesn't need any intervention. And each block, that the difference is calculated and updated. So it does not, once set up, it's like a fire and forget. However, if you would like to change the streaming to be $1,000 per month to, I don't know, $2,000 per month, you can go ahead and update that, and then it would reflect. At that point in time, gas fee is incurred, but otherwise it's just an initial setup, which in its sense is quite beautiful because the marginal cost is so low for scaling payments.
Right, correct. But if I don't know, if you're getting paid by the second and there are 3,600 seconds in an hour, how come you don't end up with 3,600 gas payments per hour?
Yeah, it's due to the way the smart contract is written, where essentially you get something called the wrapped token, which is it's appended by an X, and that wrapped token itself is accruing real time. And when you would like to redeem those funds, you unwrap that token, and then you can, say for example, DCA that to transfer from ETH or from USDC to ETH, and yeah, in that manner you can do it. So it's a beautiful way that you can do this through a smart contract, and at the point in time you can basically redeem those funds.
That's cool. Yeah, that's a lot clearer now, and I think that's how most. That's how good Web3 marketing should work. Like, you should talk about the end result, not necessarily that much the way you get there. And I think that's a sin of most Web3 products, that we just keep talking about what's going underneath the hood as opposed to the solution and what you end up getting as a user. But you could argue that our industry is still very much in a stage where infrastructure is everything, and we're building infrastructure for people in the future to build products. But nonetheless, that's pretty cool. Having gone on that tangent, what user experience fine points do you think you have got right in your product? Besides obviously stream payments.
Yeah, sure. I think that's a really interesting question. And I would say one example is adding more steps in the payments life cycle. So if I'm paying, 10,000 or 100,000 or maybe even $1 million equivalent in various tokens, best practice in UX in fintech sense is like reduce the number of steps, make it super quick and efficient for the user. But if you think about the psyche of our users, treasury managers, who are extremely scared about sending funds to the wrong address, we've actually added in extra steps to add additional friction in a good way that allows for extra checks. And we also have a way to an address book basically in our system where you can associate a person's name with an address to avoid sending funds to the wrong address. So yeah, somewhat counterintuitively, that is an improvement in UX.
That's really interesting. And I think, yeah, usually when we think about UX, we think in terms of less is better. But in this case, yeah, definitely you want more, and you want more assurances and more, yeah, friction, as you said. That's really cool, and it goes back to the reasoning from first principles thing.
Yeah, yeah. It is. It's a bit counterintuitive, definitely.
Are there any other such examples where you have to design things for both ends of the project? Because I reckon, do you consider yourself a B2B2C product?
No, just B2B. So
Okay.
yeah, just. I mean, future use cases B2B2C. Yes, sure. Like if a contributor would like to raise a payment request and then to their own organization, and that organization disperse funds to that contributor. It's something we don't support right now. Yes, in the future, I think that could be an example of B2B2C. But yeah, typically just B2B. I think, I guess another way in which we may have got the UX right is if you look at our app, it's again maybe a bit different to the rest of crypto and Web3. Most of crypto and Web3, there's there's a lot of beautiful apps out there, but they take cognitive load from the user, where ours, has a white with a gradient background. It's not extremely exciting, but it keeps the user focused on what the core job they're trying to do.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, that's interesting as well. In your, I guess if you see yourself as mostly a B2B product as opposed to B2B2C, because you're more on the SaaS spectrum, I suspect,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
that relates to what I was saying earlier about how crypto is mostly creating infrastructure at the moment. I think a lot of people are stuck in the problem of trying to be B2B2C, because they sort of had to build their own infrastructure and then create their own applications on top of this infrastructure, as opposed to using existing one. Do you have any constraints that have made you have to build your own infrastructure, or do you mostly see yourselves as staying away from that problem altogether?
I love this question because it's not spoken about often enough. If we just think about like I guess the Web3 stack, you've got your smart contract layer, your infrastructure layer, and your application layer. And as we all know, there are countless protocols, smart contracts innovating in ways you can't even imagine. And definitely there are apps as well, solving bespoke problems. Arguably not enough apps, but there are apps solving niche problems. But the infrastructure layer itself, 2 to 3 years ago, didn't really exist. So
Exactly.
I'll give you a few examples. Simply they weren't robust enough third-party APIs to interact with the EVM, to submit transactions on chain, like from a multi-sig. There weren't reliable third-party API providers that could give you a complete transaction history with all the financial records, due to nuances in each and every single smart contract. And when you start to face these problems in a very kind of immature space, as crypto especially was back then and still is, and users demand a certain experience, what do? You become an infrastructure company. No, I'm joking. We're not an infrastructure company itself, but we did have to invest a lot of time in infrastructure, and that the trade-off was like, okay, ship less features to build the better experience for the features you do offer. And it's just a trade-off, right? Like we could have chosen to not invest in infrastructure, have a worse user experience, but ship more features. It's just a trade-off, and each startup business can, like ours, has to make these decisions.
It is a trade-off, but it's also, I guess, a bit of a temptation, because a lot of times what you see some projects have is that they end up deciding, okay, I'm gonna build infrastructure to. It's almost some sort of procrastination. I'm gonna build this infrastructure and then I can build my product. And now I need to raise more funds, and now I need to. So it's a bit of a trap, and it's. Both the symptom and a result of how, like you said, immature the industry is at the moment. Um,
Yeah, exactly. And if I can add something, by the way,
yeah, please.
um, so how we think of ourselves is the closest analogy we can draw to like Web 2 is basically Brex for crypto. So if you look at Brex, it's a B2B SaaS app, neobank, and what differentiates Brex from a lot of its competitors is that from day one, Brex built their own proprietary payments infrastructure. And we like to think that in a similar light, we're building kind of a business banking type experience for crypto, powered by our own infrastructure on many occasions, to you know give the users the experience they deserve.
I wanted to ask you about your original idea versus where you are now, because I find that, yeah, in such a novel industry, you often have to start with an original idea and come up with a better way to solve, or you get to understanding the problem that you're attempting to solve in a different way that leads you to take a different direction. How does your original idea differ from what you are doing currently?
Yeah, so I think the original idea was born, by our founder Tarun, and it started out like, how can I build a very basic mass payout solution? And the context here is people, organizations were using Gnosis Safe, as it was called back then, to self-custody funds after having raised millions of dollars through ICOs, investors, etc. And it was difficult to run crypto payroll at that time, or just make payments to multiple people at the same time. What used to happen is people used to transfer, I don't know, say like $10,000 from their multisig to a MetaMask, and then do individual transactions, which has operational risk, is time consuming, etc., etc. So the thought was like, how can I create a way to do mass payout directly from my multisig, and in the flow tag the transaction, for bookkeeping. And Juan Bennett from Filecoin and IPFS loved the idea, and that was kind of the initial hook to get the first users: Uniswap Grants, ChainSafe, Biconomy, Synthetics, and others. And from that point in time, it's like, okay, how do you then iterate to adjacent problems for the same persona? And over time, it evolved to cover the kind of core financial life cycle, and then even went on to asset management. And yeah, that's where we find ourselves today.
And do you see yourself stumbling onto new problems that sort of make you think of other ways you can expand your solution stack? I know that there are a couple coming soon labels on your website, so maybe you want to touch on that.
Yeah, sure. Well, firstly, we we have a launch coming in the next 4 months or so, which is pretty exciting. But right now, I guess what comes to mind is there's two areas we're also exploring. Just as I'll give you two examples of features. So one is on-chain permissions, and another one is on-chain insurance. So on-chain permissions being, how can I create a spending limit similar to what I have in a banking app, to control, based on a time period, who can execute those transactions, etc., etc. It also comes in handy when you want to do more complex DeFi interactions, etc. And the second one is on-chain insurance. I think insurance is kind of a no-brainer or it's table stakes for many of these business banking apps. But on chain, it's an exciting new primitive, and with all the, it's possible and plausible to be able to determine a risk factor and in real time associate that to a transaction that's being made, and determine what that insurance threshold could be. So I think those are just kind of two very interesting problems that require first principles thinking to apply that to Web3.
I think well, first of all, best of lucks with the new release.
Thank you.
When it comes to, I think to begin wrapping this up, we can quickly touch on the subject of growth, and yeah, marketing in general. I find that Web3 marketing is still pretty undefined, pretty challenging. There are some ideas here and there that memes are good, but besides that, nobody seems to have much of a playbook. And certainly you see things that work for some projects not work that well for others. What breakthroughs have you gone through, or what unique insights do you think you have generated in your experience bringing something like this to market?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I'm not a founder myself, but the saying goes that first time founders think about product and second time founders think about distribution. And yeah, I'd say our founders lives by that. And what does it mean for us? Well, we believe in a two-pronged strategy of both product-led growth and kind of a sales or direct outreach led growth. So it's like, right, how can I create a product that people love with low friction, and then simultaneously, how can I take that product that people love and that trusted brand in the market and get it out to the masses. I think we're exploring growth loops as well, but right now where the market is and it being so small and us being a B2B product, it's all about relationships, and having excellent customer service. I think a good product, amazing customer service, where that product has issues as any product does, and just being a brand in the market people trust is your kind of best distribution strategy. But you have to be very active on Twitter when it comes to marketing, no doubt.
Do you feel like in this aspect, being a bit less traditionally decentralized than than a lot of other products or projects in the Web3 space, do you think that definitely plays out in your favor, or are you seeking to further decentralize?
Yeah, I think we're definitely centralized. We're not planning on decentralizing either. And with us, a lot of the kind of Web2 playbooks work. Where they don't work is where they become a bit corporate-y and that sort of thing. So yeah, I think if you've got your memes on lockdown, you're active on Twitter, that plays a big part.
And I think that definitely shows evolution in the space. When you start having centralized players comfortably using decentralized rails, that shows you that at least some base layer has been properly built and is properly getting used. And well, I'd like to thank you very much for your time, man. Can you shield your project? Where can people find you guys?
Thank you, and thanks for all the questions, and thanks for setting this up. I think it's great to create a community of builders and people who can share their stories. In terms of Coinshift, you can find us on Twitter at OXCoinshift. And yeah, we don't wanna take liberties here, so I wouldn't say much more than that.
All right. Well, thank you very much, and of course, if you have anything else that you want to tell us, please, this is the time.
When's the next bull run starting?
Where's the next bull run starting? I think